Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium our 2013 Aiming High honorees, Maliz Beams, Suni Harford, Ivy Thomas McKinney, Liz Beshel Robinson, and Kelly Tullier. And now please welcome Aiming High Awards Luncheon founder and chair, Karen Kaplowitz.
Thank you all for coming. It's my privilege to welcome you here today on behalf of Legal Momentum. And it's my special privilege to also recognize today our many former honorees who are with us. For 13 years, 80 inspiring, powerful women business leaders have supported Legal Momentum and this event and helped sustain Legal Momentum's work on behalf of the most vulnerable women and girls. Our honorees have helped us build a tremendous network of support in the business community and in the legal community, for which we're very grateful. Today, please join me in recognizing many of our former honorees who are with us here today. And if each of you would rise, some of them may still be en route this morning. Our co-chairs, Bridget Healy of ING, and there's so many of our former honorees here that I hope that you'll hold off and applaud at the very end. Deborah McKinney from Citigroup, Esta Stetcher from Goldman Sachs, our presenters, Sarah Moss from Estee Lauder, Stephanie Mudick from JP Morgan Chase, who's on her way. Oh, she's here. Oh, all right. All right, Stephanie Mudick, on time from JP Morgan Chase. Our board member, Sabina Chalmers from AB and Bev. Our honorary co-chairs, Carol Baldwin Moody, Lynn Utter, Diane Shoemaker-Krieg, and Nellie Vasquez-Rowland, and also Rosemary Nelson from Colgate-Palmolive, Eileen Murray from Bridgewater Associates, and Jane Sherburne from BNY Mellon. Now please give a warm round of applause It's really one of the hallmarks of our event that we've had the sustained support of so many of our former honorees. I also want to give a special thanks to two of our very generous sponsors here today, our underwriters, PepsiCo and Goldman Sachs. We owe a very special debt to our co-chairs, in addition to the ones I've already introduced. Larry Thompson from PepsiCo, Don Liu from Xerox, Alan Beller from Cleary Gottlieb, Sandra Goldstein from Cravath, Karen Patton Seymour from Sullivan and Cromwell, Keith Wetmore from Morrison and Forrester, Brad Karp from Paul Weiss. And I also want to make a special thanks to our honorary co-chair, Roz Gordon, who's here and who's been on every one of our committees since 2001. One final word of thanks before I turn over the podium to the president of Legal Momentum to talk more about the mission of Legal Momentum, and that's to our media partner, NACD, the National Association of Corporate Directors, Directorship Magazine. And on your way out, you'll all be able to pick up a copy of Directorship Magazine. Directorship will be profiling each of our honorees, and you'll be able to see those profiles at directorship.com. So thanks to NACD Directorship and to Chris Clark, the publisher and editor who's with us here today. Thank you very much, and it's now my honor to introduce the president of Legal Momentum, Elizabeth Greer.
Thank you, Karen. I actually, too, have a few thank yous to do before I turn to talking about Legal Momentum, our mission, and some of our accomplishments of the past year. And the first thank you is, in fact, to Karen. About 13 years ago, Karen had this vision that she could honor successful businesswomen and help support Legal Momentum by putting a lunch together. Because she's Karen, simply having the vision meant that it was going to happen. And for the past 13 years, every year, as our angel volunteer, she has essentially done most of the work to put this event together. So if you would join me in thanking Karen for all her help. I also need to say a special thank you to the staff of Legal Momentum who helped Karen put this wonderful event together. It does take more than one person, and I'd particularly like to single out Julie Repchek for all of the hard work that she has put in to making this such a special day. My last administrative announcement is that we're going to have at least one person who is live tweeting from this event, hopefully capturing some of the really pithy comments. She's going to be doing it at #AimingHigh2013. So for any of you who tweet, feel free to follow or join in the conversation. Legal Momentum. We were founded now almost 45 years ago, originally called the Now Legal Defense and Education Fund, with a pretty simple vision and mission. And that vision and mission was that women and girls in our society should be considered and treated equally to men. Doesn't seem very hard. And we had a few tools as a legal advocacy organization, frankly the oldest one in the country dedicated to advancing the rights of girls, to trying to accomplish that. Our tools include litigation, education, and public policy. So for 45 years, we have been working using those tools to try to get to equality. And thanks to Legal Momentum's hard work and your support, the support of others like you, and the hard work of many, many other individuals and organizations for the last 4 decades, we've come an incredibly long way. Law and public policy have developed. Society has changed. I mean, my goodness, just look around this room and you can see what I'm talking about. 45 years ago, you would not have been able to get 500 people in a room and in a group that included so many successful, amazing, talented businesswomen and so many amazing men who really supported those women and the ideas of Legal Momentum. Rebecca West said, in describing the time that we were facing when we were first founded, if we had left it to men, toilets would have been the great obstacle to human progress. Toilets was always the reason women couldn't become engineers or pilots or even members of parliament. They didn't have women's toilets. Well, I am happy to report that after 45 years, we have put ladies' rooms in a lot of places. But we're not done yet. There's simply not enough women in power. We see them, they're here in this room, we see them on TV, we see them in Congress, we see them on the Supreme Court. But we have to remember that visibility doesn't equal equality. And while it's great to see all those women, when you push back and you look at the underlying numbers, the percentages they represent, it is still teeny percentages of the people in power and the people with money. So we have to build on the success, build on the visibility, and to keep pushing to get more women to that point. Marlo Thomas once said, "A man has to be Joe McCarthy to be called ruthless." all a woman has to do is put you on hold. Unfortunately, that remains all too true, and we need to keep pushing for a world where women can compete and can be recognized as strong competitors without being considered ruthless. In addition, although we've made great strides at what I would call the high end, we still have significant issues at the other end, at the end where our poor and disenfranchised sisters still reside. We have developed lots of policies and we've developed some really good laws, but those laws are only good and they're only effective if they actually apply in real life to people's lives. And unfortunately, for all too many women and girls in the United States, the scope of the laws, the benefits of the laws, simply have not reached far enough. We still live in a society where there are all too many pregnant women who are trying to choose between a paycheck needed to support their families and having a healthy pregnancy because their employers will not provide minor accommodations during their pregnancy. We live in a world, a society in which there are literally millions of women and children living in poverty, food insecure, housing insecure every day. We live in a world in which we have too many low-paying, limited, forced part-time jobs, and those jobs are filled primarily by women, often by women who are responsible for supporting their families. We live in a world where our public schools are not, in fact, providing the same educational opportunities to girls and boys. We live in a world where women are paid less than men, even for the very, very same job. And those women can be fired. They can be and they are fired for asking their colleagues, the men that they work with, how much those men are getting paid. So not only is it okay to pay them different, or they are in fact being paid different, the women can't find out. We're living in a world in which there are still judges that believe that if a woman cannot show significant internal injuries, then she was not raped. We're living in a world in which girls who are trafficked into prosecution are still treated as criminals and not as victims. We're living in a world where a woman can get a protective order after a hearing before a judge in the morning in which she has proved that she and her children are at risk and danger from her boyfriend, and that boyfriend can legally go buy a gun that afternoon. And finally, we're living in a world where every study indicates that early childhood education is an incredible investment that pays off from a pure dollar terms, many, many fold in the future. But most low-income women cannot find and cannot afford good childcare. So these are some of the issues that are left, a few, to be addressed, and those are the issues, each one of those, Legal Momentum worked on using its tools over the past year. Those aren't all the issues we worked on, but those are some of them. Now, I could stand up here and would be delighted to all day and tell you about what we did on each one and what we're planning to do, but then we'd never get to hear from our wonderful honorees. So I'm just gonna highlight one or two things that I'm really proud of, and then sit down and we can hear from our honorees. So a couple of highlights. Our Women in Poverty program, which addresses, as you can imagine, poverty issues, had two things I'm particularly proud of this year. One, they issued a groundbreaking report called Worst Off, which you can find on our website, in which they compared the United States to the treatment in the United States of single-parent households with the treatment of single-parent households in 16 other developed nations, the countries we would consider our peers. Not surprisingly, the United States, on just about every metric they looked at, was worse. The single-parent families were in a worse position. They were treated worse in terms of employment, government benefits, all of those things. What was really surprising, however, was how much worse, and that the gap is getting larger. That work has been cited extensively by the media, policymakers. It's really sort of revolutionizing the thinking around single parenthood and poverty and what we should be doing about it. The other thing our Women in Poverty program did, or one of the other things this year, is they launched a website, or a piece of a website called SPAN, which is a conglomeration of articles and thinking about single parenthood. It's the Single Parent Policy Advocacy Network. And it now serves as a resource for hundreds and hundreds of government people, policymakers, media, as the place to go to find out what people are writing about and thinking about and studying and talking about with respect to issues surrounding single parenthood. That's a little bit about women in poverty. Women in work. We're spending a lot of time looking at tradeswomen. Now, working in the trades, being a sheet metal worker, a construction worker, a fireman, an electrician, those are great jobs. They pay well, you get benefits, you can buy a house, you can raise a family. They're also one of the last groups of jobs in this country that have almost no gender integration. Almost all men. 98% of men doing them, women can't get into them. There's lots of people who are trying to work on this and lots of programs to try to deal with it, but it came to our attention that nobody was talking to anybody. And people thought, they're doing this. And they said, no, they're doing this. And other people said, I'm trying to help, but actually I've never met a construction worker, so I don't know what they need. So this year, one of the things we did was we convened a conference to which we invited and in fact got to come, a little like herding cats, people from the federal government, the state government, and the city government, from a multitude of agencies, from the legislative branch as well. We got tradeswomen to come, we got business to come, we got the unions to come, and we got the academics to come. So we put everybody in a room together, had a panel, and led discussions over what is really happening out there and how do we solve the problem of why women are not getting into and are not able to stay in because they're not getting the jobs in many instances and they're being harassed in other instances in these professions. It was a bit like herding cats. Nobody believed we could pull it off, but we did, and it is already bearing fruit. Various enforcement agencies are looking at enforcing, different agencies are taking different things, business is working on the issue, the unions are more focused on the issue, and everyone's talking to each other. So we are really, really proud and pleased of the progress there. Women in violence. With the help of a number of the law firms in this room, we have filed briefs over the past year in a number of cases relating to issues of violence against women and children. We also have spent a significant amount of time working on issues around Native American women and violence. You may well have read in the New York Times or other places about the high level of incidents of violence against women, domestic and sexual, on the reservations, the Indian nations. We have done advocacy around solving some of those problems in connection with the Violence of Women Act, education around that, and we also put together and gave the first two-day seminar, if you will, at an Indian reservation, at a nation, about domestic and sexual violence, to the tribal court there, to the tribal leaders there, to start to train the people in the nations to be better able to address the circumstances themselves. And we were very proud of being invited to do that and of putting it together, and we hope to do more. I think that all that we do is incredibly important and effective, but of course I'm supposed to think that. And I was thinking, how am I going to convince everybody that it's not, that in fact I'm right, that this stuff is making a difference and that it is important. And as I was trying to figure out how to do that yesterday, a copy of a letter came across my desk that was written by the executive director of the New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs. And it was written discussing Legal Momentum's work. Now that coalition provides support to all of the sexual assault service providers in New Mexico, and it also has responsibility for seeing to the legal needs of sexual violence survivors in New Mexico. And I just want to read you what they wrote about Legal Momentum's work in that area. We have utilized Legal Momentum's expert staff to provide keynote addresses at our prosecutor conference and have used their in-depth judicial online course addressing intimate partner sexual violence for statewide training. Most recently, our staff had the pleasure of participating in Legal Momentum's webinar, Raped or Seduced: How Language Helps Shape Our Response to Sexual Violence. This was an outstanding sample of the information provided by Legal Momentum. It was based on evidence and many years of legal experience. Additionally, Legal Momentum's Understanding Sexual Violence DVD curriculum changed how our coalition and New Mexico's prosecutors and law enforcement investigators train and respond to the most common forms of sexual violence. Legal Momentum's ingenious, innovative, field-changing accomplishments are proof of their ability and focus. We have no other source for the richness that Legal Momentum has provided to our statewide trainings. So you don't have to believe me, you can believe some of the people who actually use the materials that we put together. They really, really do make a difference, and for that, I thank you. So, this is where we are. We're working on these things. We have big problems still. I am dissatisfied with where we are, but I am an optimist about where we're going. I do believe when I think about what we have accomplished over the last year and over the last 40 years at Legal Momentum, when I look around this room, when I think about our amazing honorees, when I think about the work Legal Momentum is in the middle of doing and has planned to do next year with your support, for which we thank you, I feel incredibly optimistic that we are going to be able to keep the progress going and we are going to be able to solve some of the problems that remain. I hope that in the next 45 years or so, we can stand here and we won't have a long list of things, but we will be congratulating ourselves on a job well done. And for enabling us to get as far as we've gotten and enabling us to continue fighting the fight, I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. It could not happen without you. So thank you, and thank you for being here today.